You are standing in the cemetery of Keramikos, just outside the walls of Athens, in the gray hour before sunrise in the last years of the 5th century BCE. The air smells of damp earth, olive oil, and burning pine. A family has gathered around a trench cut into the rock. The body of a young woman lies on a wooden bier, wrapped in white linen, a small clay perfume bottle at her throat. Her mother kneels down. She pries open the dead jaw with steady fingers. And into the mouth, she slides a single small bronze coin. A fisherman, a farmer, a potter would recognize it instantly. It is an obol, a day's wage. The mother closes the jaw, whispers something, and steps back. The thin coin waits in the dark, under the tongue for a ferryman who has not yet appeared. In your world, death is usually a hospital room, a quiet corridor, a black car, a service. Your body is handled by professionals. Nobody puts currency in your mouth. But your ancestors believed that dying was not the end of the journey. It was the boarding gate. And the first thing the dead had to do was pay the fare. Think about what that means. Every system your modern life has built, the pension, the insurance policy, the retirement plan, the promise that you will die comfortably and be remembered kindly, ends at the grave. Your ancestors built systems that began there. Their afterlife was not a vague metaphor. It was a place with geography, with rivers, with gates, with tolls, with passwords, with a bureaucracy you had to navigate while you were still a soul, cold, naked, and newly dead. Get it wrong, and you wandered the shore of the River Styx for 100 years, invisible, thirsty, screaming at people who could no longer hear you. So what did the ancient Greeks actually believe happened after death? And why does every source you have read, every movie, every half-remembered myth, seem to tell a different story? Because the truth is that the Greeks themselves disagreed. They carried 5 different maps of the underworld in their pockets at the same time and used whichever one they needed. Stay with me, because the real answer is buried in the archaeology. In gold, in a papyrus found on a funeral pyre, and in the words of ordinary grieving mothers scratched into stone. The first map was Homer's, and it was the darkest. In Book 11 of the Odyssey, composed around 750 BCE, the poet sends Odysseus to the edge of the world, to the land of the dead, to dig a trench and pour blood into it so the ghosts will come and speak. Homer calls this scene the Nikia, a rite by which the dead are called up and questioned. And what Odysseus finds down there is not a heaven and not a hell. It is a vast, gray, echoing house beneath the earth called the House of Hades. The dead are not punished and not rewarded. They are simply there, forever, like photographs of themselves, drained of color and will. When the ghost of Achilles appears, Odysseus tries to comfort him, and the greatest warrior who ever lived shatters every romantic myth about dying gloriously. He says he would rather be a hired farmhand on earth, working for a man with no land, than rule all the dead below. Think about that. The Greeks' own national hero in their own founding poem telling you that death is worse than the worst life you can imagine. This is the map most people remember, and it should scare you. Homer's Underworld had no judgment for the ordinary dead, no paradise for the good, no fire for the wicked. Everyone went to the same gray basement. The only exceptions were a handful of God's favorites. The hero Menelaus promised in Homer's poem a blessed afterlife in the Elysian Fields at the ends of the earth, and the heroes who in Hesiod's telling were sent to the Isles of the Blessed in the Western Ocean, where the earth bore honey-sweet fruit 3 times a year. But here is the twist. Those prizes were for demigods and kings, not for you. Your grandmother, your father, your dead child? They were shuffling in the gray basement with everyone else. So where did ordinary people find hope? The second map was practical, and it was written in the earth, not in poetry. The Greeks buried their dead surrounded by objects for the journey, and the most famous of those objects is the coin I slid into that woman's mouth at the start. It is called Charon's obol. Charon was the ferryman of the dead, an old man in a filthy cloak who pulled a flat boat across the rivers of the underworld, and he did not work for free. The archaeology confirms the custom. The earliest Greek graves containing coins date to around 470 BCE, and from about 400 BCE onward, it became standard practice to place a single low-value coin in the mouth of the corpse. The dead needed the fare, or they would be stranded on the near bank, among the cold and the unburied forever. This was not a metaphor. It was the ancient world's first toll road, and the toll was a day's wage, and the tolls kept coming. The dead-faced Cerberus, the 3-headed dog who guarded the gate of Hades, and he could be bribed with a barley cake soaked in honey, which is why Greek graves sometimes hold those cakes in clay dishes. They had to be careful not to drink from the pool of Lee, forgetfulness, unless they wanted to lose themselves entirely. Every step was prepared for, physically, in the funeral, the prothesis, the laying out, then the ekphora, the procession, then the burial. And the living fed the dead, libations of wine, milk, and honey, poured into the grave through pipes, because the dead were thirsty, and a thirsty ghost is a dangerous neighbor. Watch how fast this escalates. We have moved from a poem about gloom to a full logistical nightmare, a bureaucracy with fees, passwords, and a dog. The third map is where hope finally enters, and it is the most secret map of all. Long before the classical age, a movement spread across Greece named after the mythical poet Orpheus. Its followers were called Orphics, and they believed something radical. The soul is divine, the body is a prison, death is a release, and what happens after death depends on how you lived and on what you knew. They buried their initiates with gold, not jewelry, but passwords. Thin gold leaves stamped with instructions, placed on the chest or the mouth of the dead. At the Greek colony of Hipponion in southern Italy, excavators found one of the earliest ever recovered. It tells the dead soul what to say at the spring of memory. I am a child of earth and starry sky, but my race is of heaven alone. At Pallina in Thessaly, 2 more tablets promise the initiate. Now you have died, and now you are born, thrice happy one, on this same day. Tell Persephone that Bacchus himself has released you. And then there was Eleusis, the most famous secret of the ancient world. Just outside Athens stood the sanctuary of Demeter, where every year thousands of initiates gathered for the Eleusinian Mysteries. The climax happened inside a vast hall called the Telesterion, which held roughly 3,000 people at once. What happened inside, no initiate ever wrote down. The penalty for speaking was death. For 2,000 years, thousands were initiated, and not one of them broke the silence, as far as we know. But we know what the initiates believed they received: a better lot after death. The Homeric hymn to Demeter promises that whoever is initiated will fare better in the house of Hades, while the uninitiated wallow in the muck. And we have physical proof that this hope was real and ordinary. In 1962, workmen near Thessaloniki uncovered a charred papyrus on a funeral pyre. The Derveni Papyrus, Europe's oldest surviving book, dated to the last quarter of the 4th century BCE. It is a commentary on an Orphic poem explaining how ritual offerings guide the soul through the afterlife. The dead of Greece were traveling with maps, with passwords, with fare, and with hope. But here is the last thing, the thing the poetry, the gold, and the mysteries never quite capture. The 4th map was not written down. It was carved by hand by ordinary people into stone. Tens of thousands of Greek grave inscriptions survive, and they are the most honest documents we have from antiquity. Some are formal, many are heartbreaking. A father in Athens buries his 8-year-old daughter and writes, "Here I placed you, my sweet child, and I will never stop grieving." A mother buries her son at 20 and writes, "You left for war, and the sea brought back only your name." A husband buries his wife and tells the stone that the house has been cold since the day she left. What did these people really believe happened after death? Look at what they say to the dead. They speak to them in the present tense. They bring them food. They sit at the grave during the festival of the dead, the Anthesteria, and pour wine into the earth, and tell the dead about the harvest, about the wedding, about the child who was born. Whatever their official theology, in their hearts the dead were not gone. They were just on the other side of a very thin wall, listening, hungry for the sound of their own names. And now the part that makes this story genuinely strange. Experts still argue about which map was the real belief. Some scholars, pointing to Homer and the funerary archaeology, say most ancient Greeks quietly expected the gray basement, and the mystery cults were a minority comfort. Others, pointing to the gold tablets and the spread of mystery sanctuaries, argue that by the 4th century BCE, the promise of a better afterlife had become mainstream. And here is a twist the textbooks miss. The coin in every mouth was not as universal as we assume. The archaeology shows the custom was real but inconsistent, common in some regions and periods, absent in others, a folk habit that grew slowly, not a dogma everyone obeyed. The Greeks, in other words, were exactly like us. They did not have one belief about death. They had several, and they used whichever one helped them get through the night. Now look at your own life for 1 second. You carry your dead in your pocket. Your phone holds their photographs, their voices, their last messages. You scroll through them late at night, the way a Greek mother poured wine into a grave. You still talk to them. You still ask them questions. You still set a place for them at anniversaries. the way the Greeks set out meals at the festival of the dead. The names change, the ferryman is gone, the obol is now a photograph on a screen, but the geometry of grief is exactly the same. The dead are on the other side of a thin wall, and you are on this side, pressing your ear to it, leaving them coins that no one can spend. So what did the ancient Greeks believe happened after death? Everything. Gloom, tolls, gold, hope, a gray basement, and a bright meadow all at once. And one thing more, the thing that mattered most. They believed the dead could still hear their names spoken by the living. Say a name, and the thin wall trembles. That belief, at least, was never in doubt. Hold that thought, because next week we go inside the one ritual no Greek would ever describe. The secret night at Eleusis, where 3,000 initiates saw something in the fire that made death lose its sting, and the penalty for telling anyone what it was death. Subscribe, and you will come closer to that secret than almost anyone alive. Drop a comment. If you could leave one message for someone you have lost, what would it say? The most honest answers end up in the next script. Hit subscribe. We are just getting started.